All right, welcome back to another episode of the Two-Wheeled Rider podcast. You may notice something a little bit different in the background if you're watching this on YouTube right now, and that's because we are in Brian's basement, and the reason we are in his basement is because we are waking up very early tomorrow morning to go hop on a plane and go to
Costa Rica.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going down to ride dirt bikes. I'm sure we'll talk about that on an upcoming podcast. I'm going to put money down that I'm going to put out some sort of video series on that too, so pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that and just capturing the memories. It's going to be a great time.
It's going to be fun. Anyway, but we've got other stuff to talk about tonight, and if you read the title of this podcast, obviously we're going to talk about motorcycle travel, specifically we're going to say mostly on-road motorcycle travel. But before we get started tonight, we've got our bourbon here. Brian asked me what to get. I didn't realize he was going to get the big boy. But we've got a Buffalo Trace. I don't think I've ever owned a bottle of Buffalo Trace this big. We're back to 90 proof. This stuff's excellent. Been to that distillery before, too. You're going to hear that a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, I guess when I saw Dave at the last one kind of go through the bottle so fast, I got the biggest bottle and realized he wasn't here tonight. So
yeah, it's just you and me tonight. We will have guests back on, and we'll touch on that a little bit probably in this episode. But toast for tonight.
Cheers.
You ever had Buffalo Trace before?
No.
What do you think?
No, it's actually good. I know we drank some really good stuff before, but this is actually very nice.
Buffalo Trace is one of the, it's becoming harder to find. You can find it a little bit more in Maryland. West Virginia, when I find bottles of it, or even Virginia, I usually buy them up because it's right around the same price as Jack Daniels, but it's higher proof, and I think it tastes a little better.
Yeah, I like the taste.
All right, so one thing I just want to touch on before we get into this episode and before a couple other things we have to cover is thank you guys so much for the support we're getting from the motorcycle community. I mean, as we're doing this one, this will likely be our fourth episode that comes out, but it's definitely the fourth one we're recording, and I'm just kind of blown away. I mean, the support's been awesome so far. So
it's amazing. We kind of knew that, it's going to take a little while to gain traction. We're still learning, from setup and just getting better at this, and just the comments, the spreading, the shares of everything. It really just kind of gets us more excited to talk about motorcycles.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool because especially on some of the platforms like Facebook, it's been shared around quite a bit, and there's people commenting on stuff. They're not friends of, I don't want to say that in a bad way, people we've never met before that have been reaching out to us. So really, really cool. Appreciate it. Whether it's the podcast or it's the video that goes up on YouTube, please share it. Please let your friends know about it if you feel like it's something they might be interested in. And again, I don't remember the guy's comment, and I wish I had it in front of me right now, but he commented on the Two-Wheeled Rider Facebook page and said, I'm not even into off-road racing, but I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I learned a lot of stuff. And it was entertaining and pretty cool to listen to. So the fact that someone that's not even into off-road racing, the episode that Andrew and Dave were on, and still listened, I mean, hopefully they'll show up at the track one weekend.
Yeah, well, that's cool, but I think it's one thing that we talked about very early on is, we just hope to get more people into different disciplines. So maybe it's a guy that's on road all the time and he listens and he comes out and tries his first off-road race, or maybe it's someone that's only ever been off-road, and then they're like, wow, that motorcycle trip sound exciting. I'm going to get a street bike and take a trip.
And to be fair, we're probably going to have guests on talking about different disciplines that we haven't attempted yet, just for the simple standpoint we want to learn, and something kind of cool.
Yet is the key word.
Yeah, we've already been talking about some stuff we want to do. So we do want to get in, speaking of support, we want to get into some of the people that are supporting the podcast. Once again, Luke Harding, he was our first contributor. He's at the contributor level. He's still with us. We've got, I don't have the person's last name. And we'll get into this. We'll have a quick commercial later on. But Dylan on Patreon is one of our patrons on there at the contributor level. One-time contributions. I'm going to mention Dave because he did throw in $5. I don't know if he remembers that he threw in $5 at that point in the night, but Dave is a one-time contributor, and I figured it'd be fair because he was on that episode when he actually did it that we give him a shout out.
That's actually more than fair because I would expect like a negative 35 there because he contributed $5 but drank, like $40 in whiskey.
That's true. Dave still owes me money. Kristen Orsini, my wife, threw in $10. Very nice of her to do. Amanda Knapp. And that is someone, if you were on the Facebook page earlier this week, she did a video live at Supercross and mention this podcast because she is going to be on it. If you don't know who she is, check her out on the different social media platforms at She Shall Ride. But if you watch Supercross, you should know who she is because she was just on the Tampa broadcast. She did the Toyota Make Up the Mud. That was like a 2-minute video segment. She was also on Race Day Live earlier in the day. Tons of media exposure. I can't wait to have Amanda on because I want to know what she got to meet Bubba.
Yeah,
Like,
I saw the picture. I was like, that's cool.
No,
and he just came out of, kind of hiding to come back to the Supercross races. So,
dude, what was it? It was Adam Sansarillo that was looking for Bubba like a year and a half ago. No one could find him, and now Amanda's standing next to him at the track.
She found him.
She did find him. That was pretty cool. The other thing I liked that she did, speaking of She Shall Ride, she brought her stickers along, and she was handing them to all those guys going, hey, while we're getting a selfie, hold this sticker up, which is great for promotion.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, she has her PhD. She's one smart woman, and I think the marketing side of that and just bringing more exposure to our sport, the family aspect, that 2-minute segment just featured her whole family. So I think that's really unique of what she's bringing to the sport and just really trying to get it to grow.
Yeah, I was trolling her husband because they shared it. I think Supercross shared it on YouTube after the fact, and Ryan had commented on it. And I said, hey, the guy in the video looks a lot like you. So it was cool to see Ryan and the whole family on there. If you missed it on my Instagram stories, their youngest son, Mason, was photobombing during Race Day Live, and that's hilarious. Maybe I'll reshare that again so people can check that out. Maybe I'll throw it up on the Facebook page. So happy to have Amanda on at the production crew level, and we'll explain what these different levels are during our commercial break later on. This is a big one. SRT AMA East Hare Scrambles presented by Beta is on as a production crew level sponsor of the show. We'll touch on them here in just a few moments. Morgan Graves, actually just earlier today. So, I mean, we're recording this on, Friday the 21st of February. Earlier today, he hopped on at the production crew level on Patreon. And we also have Jeff Hokinson. He's one that messaged me. He's at the executive producer level. That's the highest level. And what's cool about that is if you want to come on one of my riding events, one of the two-wheeled rider riding events, we're going to do 2 this year. I haven't announced them yet. I'm still working on the dates. We may do 3. The third one will be totally different than the first 2. And we'll just say it'll involve some off-road if we end up getting that third one in there. But if you sign up at the executive producer level, that allows you first entry into those events that we've done 3 of them in the past. They've all sold out within minutes. So thank you, Jeff, for hopping on at that level. We do owe some of you guys handwritten notes and sticker packs. We will get those mailed out to you. Like I said, we're flying out to Costa Rica tomorrow. We're going to be gone for about a week. We're home for a few days before we hop on a plane again. So we can go watch Supercross in Daytona, but we'll get those out to you, promise. And then J2 Motorsports, what do we want to say about that? They're going to be, if you guys check out my YouTube channel, I've done quite a few bike reviews. They get, we'll just say, lots of views because I try to be as thorough and as in-depth as possible, and I try to only work with dealerships that are going to allow me to keep the bike for a decent period of time. Like, this isn't a demo ride. This is me going out and actually testing it. They're going to be providing me with some bikes this year. I can't wait. I heard the number 790. Not 790 bikes, but those of you that are into motorcycle riding, the number 790 and how important that is when it comes to adventure bikes right now, or just that engine when it comes to a specific Austrian brand. So might be throwing my leg over one of those.
Yeah, J2 Motorsports is just awesome. Obviously, they've helped us out a lot, but just super family-oriented shop. I think, they always talk about Saturday morning cartoons. My kids like to go to JT Motorsports Saturday morning, rather stride around, give fist bumps to all the workers. They've just been, really big into the youth program, helping out, the kids, and then as well as just really trying to make their mark in the industry. Super helpful, great service. Just a all-around great shop, and their new shop that they just
that thing's
moved
awesome.
Location. Oh, it's you walk in there and you can just tell the level of service you're going to get from just the presentation.
Well, I even saw, speaking of youth racing program, I think it was earlier this week, like they were even, giving some promotion to a kid, and I don't know how old he was. He was very small. He was doing mini GPs, road race. on like a CRF 50 or whatever with slicks or street tires on it, which that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, Luke's the same way. He sees that and he's like, "Oh, what's that about?" And I think it just opens the doors to the many different aspects of motorcycles.
Yeah, for sure. So we just mentioned that SRT AMA East Hare Scrambles presented by Beta's on as a production crew level sponsor. Just kind of quickly, you have a little bit more experience in AMA East than what we did. We ran quite a few of the events last year. I think Noah podiumed the one up in New York, but Luke did basically the entire series. You want to touch on that for just a minute about what AMA East is?
First, I got to give a shout out to Noah for that round in New York. That was probably one of the gnarliest courses ever, and he did amazing.
It was nothing but mud. It was raining, and it was on a ski slope.
Yeah.
Like one mess up and you're going all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, that was all about who's the toughest. So he definitely showed his skills there. But, AMA East, it's a great series. So we ran it last year, and it was just opened up a ton of different tracks. So AMA East kind of touches into multiple series and then wraps into their own series. So some of the rounds are in ECEA. Some are all the way, in Michigan down to Oklahoma. They really touch on a lot of series. So what we liked about it is he was able to go to a different region, ride against different riders, and really test his skills against them, and then ride new terrain. We got to fly into Oklahoma. AMA East really has a great organization where they helped us. Paul Ritz, shout out to him. He loaded up all our bikes and drove all the way to Oklahoma, and we got to fly in, and Luke had that factory experience. And it was all organized from the great people in AMA East. He was able to win the 7-9 65 championship and then go to Columbus, Ohio, and they had a great banquet, super professional. He got to go up on stage in front of a ton of different people and just all around very professional, and a great series to test your skills against a wide variety of regions and racers.
And he was in American Motorcyclist magazine, this latest issue, because I noticed him in there. He was up on stage with all the rest of the #1 plate winners, so that's pretty cool. All right, so we're going to take a quick break here in just a moment, and then we're going to come back and talk about Brian's going to be asking. We're going to kind of turn the tables a little bit. Brian's going to be doing more of the interview because we're going to go over motorcycle travel. And I know that's a very broad topic. I will say we'll narrow it down a little bit to mainly U.S. motorcycle travel. So those of you that are overseas that would like to come ride the U.S., hopefully you get some tidbits and knowledge from that. And those of you in the U.S. that want to go ride the U.S., well, this is tailor-made for you. So we'll be back in just a few moments. All right, so that's our quick commercial, which apparently has worked because we got some people supporting us now. So I guess we're going to get into the whole motorcycle travel thing now. We've got some topics or specifics planned for this. So, Brian, you kind of want to kick it off?
Yeah, definitely. I think, a lot of people, I think that's kind of your major focus around your channel is kind of all around motorcycle traveling. And a lot of people have a lot of questions, and myself is included. I really want to kind of make the next jump. I've talked previously about going along on the Wild and Wonderful weekend, but I'd really like to kind of take the next step and really travel across the United States. So I think this is going to be just as informational for myself as well. So maybe just kind of talk about your background and how you've traveled throughout the United States.
Yeah, sure. So, and I kind of mentioned this maybe in the first podcast, I've got quite a few family members that they were big motorcycle travelers. So something I always wanted to do. I kind of didn't get into it as early as I would have liked to, though this is going to sound kind of odd because my first, and I say first overnight trip, it was actually like a 4-day trip, was all the way back in 2013. So we're talking like 17 years ago. So I actually meant 2003, not 2013, but upon further reflection, it was actually 2004. So sorry about the confusion there. And I was on a CBR 600, still with my sheepskin seat cover. Now, I've changed sheepskin seat covers at this point, and I've gone with a little bit, newer one. But we did a trip down the Blue Ridge Parkway and through the Smoky Mountains, and it was an awesome trip. We had Tail the Dragon that trip. And that was my first experience traveling, multiple days. And then eventually got rid of the CBR and got a VFR 800. And then a Yamaha FJR 1300, and then those of you that are familiar with my channel know I'm riding around on a KTM 1290 Super Adventure now. Like, that's my bike of choice. But that's kind of my touring bikes I went through, though obviously a CBR 600 F4i is not really made for touring. But I wouldn't consider, I don't really consider myself a motorcycle traveler until maybe 6-7 years ago. And that's when I started doing more overnight trips. I did the first few solo, and then I guess she was my girlfriend at the time, and now wife, came along with me on some longer ones. We went down to Alabama, hit Tail of the Dragon again on the way down. Stopped by Jack Daniels on the way down, of course. And went down to Birmingham, check out the Motorsports Museum down there, which is unbelievable. And then, I don't remember, it was that year or the next, it was probably still that year. Might have been 2015. Rode up to Maine and caught all the New England states. But 2015 was what I would consider my first big motorcycle trip. That's where I ended up at the Grand Canyon, which was not the idea for the trip. It was actually to go out and ride Rocky Mountain National Park. But it was calling for rain and storms there for the next 2 to 3 days, which kind of defeated the purpose of going because you wanted to see the beautiful views. So I pulled out my trusty Rand McNally Atlas and said, where else can I get to? And I figured I could get to the Grand Canyon. We had 10 days is what we had total to get out there and back. And we were able to get the Grand Canyon in there, which I don't care how many movies you watch or pictures you see. Until you experience it in person, you have no idea how large that thing is. It's unbelievable. 2016, again, we did another 10-day trip that year, and I'm leaving out like the smaller, like 2 to 3 day or 4 to 5 day trips at this point, because when you're talking 10-day trips, 2-week trips, 3-week trip, 4 or 5 days anymore is just like, it's a fun ride.
Yeah, but you probably had those to kind of build up right in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. But early on in 2016, I did. Well, it's still my only. I've had a couple that have been canceled, but I did an iron butt ride. I rode from Bunker Hill, West Virginia to Key West, Florida. I left Bunker Hill at midnight, and I was in Key West at, I think, 8:21 that evening, and promptly went out to Duval Street to Sloppy Joe's to go drink margaritas the rest of the night. So I rode, I think officially it was 1,270 miles in basically like 21 hours. And then there's a whole story about getting back, but we may talk about that later. But our big trip that year was to ride out to Yellowstone National Park. And we hit up plenty of things along the way. We kind of took the northern route on the way out up through North Dakota. And then we kind of dropped back down into Wyoming to go to Yellowstone. And then when I say southern route, I mean, we were only a few hundred more miles south. But part of it was I wanted to hit some of those states because it had always been a goal of mine to ride the lower 48. So, jump forward to the next year, 2017. We rode all the way out to Seattle and then dropped down the coast through California. And then when we started basically on our way back, and that was a 16-day trip, as soon as we crossed over to Nevada, boom, I clicked off the lower 48 that I'd ridden to and in. So that was pretty cool. I don't think Kristen really enjoyed that day because that was the same day we rode through Death Valley. Oof. And it was 121.6 degrees.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
It's, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, you had to be fully geared up, which sounds odd because it's so hot. But if you cracked your visor open, it was like someone took a blow dryer on high heat and just shoved it right inside your helmet. I mean, it was...
Yeah, the air's not your friend there.
No, it's not. I thoroughly enjoyed it. She absolutely hated it. But basically, like the exit of the park where we came out was Nevada, and then we stayed. I made up for it because we stayed 2 nights in Las Vegas, and she got to hang out by the pool for a couple of days. But hell, when we got to Las Vegas that night, it was still like the sun had gone down. It's like 9 o'clock at night or whatever. It was still 108 degrees. And then you got all the cars and stuff around you, which makes it feel even hotter. Yeah. So that was 2017. And again, we're kind of sticking to the U.S. thing. I've got to ride overseas, but I don't consider myself an expert on that. But then 2018, I clicked off the lower 48. Might as well ride to Alaska. So that's what I did there. I think that ended up being 19 days. Nearly 10,000 miles. I spent, I don't remember what it was. It was at least an entire week outside of the lower 48. I mean, I was in Alaska for 2-3 days. I could have ridden more up there. and if you want to ask questions on that later, you're more than welcome to. But the whole goal of the trip was to get to Alaska, and I enjoyed the ride along the way. And then I stayed in Canada all the way until the last day when I crossed back over. I don't remember if I was in Buffalo or Niagara. I'd have to go back and watch the videos, but it close enough. And then rode that back the final day. I mean, I was excited to get home after that one. And then after I was home for like 2 days, I was ready to hop back on the bike again. But
was that your first time riding through Canada, coming back?
It was. We had, when we rode up and did the main trip back in, I don't remember, was it 14 or 15? We stayed in either Niagara or Buffalo one night. I think we stayed in Buffalo because it was, I think it was 4th of July weekend time frame, that sort of thing. So it was, they do like a big fireworks display, you know, I think in Niagara. I think they did one in Buffalo. We couldn't get a hotel in Niagara, which on the U.S. side, not that great anyway. I'd rather stay on the Canadian side. But I didn't have my passport at the time, and the other guy riding with us, Brad, he didn't have his passport. Kristen had hers, and my buddy Thad, not to be confused with Brad, they had their passport, so they walked across, and Brad and I just hung out there at the falls for a while. So I really couldn't have ridden in there even while we were up there. So yeah, when I crossed over into out of Montana into Alberta, that was the first time I'd ever I don't want to say first time I ever set foot in Canada. I'd been there before, but the first time ever on the bike. So yeah, I mean, that was quite the experience. The people up there were super friendly. There's some differences between Canada and the U.S., but for the most part, you know, I kept saying when I got into Alberta, I was like, they might as well just call this Montana North. I mean, it felt about the same.
Feels the same, yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my background. You know, like I said, last 6-7 years, I've been traveling around the United States. I did not do much traveling in the U.S. last year, and that's because I went to Europe and rode for a couple of weeks. But I am going to be doing some traveling in the U.S. again this year. I've yet to set my plans because I've got like 2-3 different rides I'm looking at. They're not going to be, you know, 15, 16, 20-day rides. I'm probably going to do maybe a couple 1-week rides, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy riding to the U.S. I love this place.
Yeah, sounds exciting. So I think that kind of brings to the next part is all around. I think I have some questions kind of around planning. As I said before, I really want to kind of aspire to doing one of these trips across the country. And I think the first thing that overwhelms me a little bit is how do I plan my route? So I can go into my computer and go, hey, I want to ride to Colorado, and there's a cool national forest out there. Let me plug that into Google Maps, and I have a route. And I know that's just going to take me, you know, on the most direct route, a highway, not the great fun roads that I really want to enjoy along the way and maybe miss some great opportunities. So how do you really plan the route of finding those great roads?
Yeah, so you just buy my book, Motorcyclist Guide to Travel, and that'll walk you. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, next question.
No, we can get into specifics. Me planning, I mean, so the first thing, I mean, you got to figure out how much time you have. I mean, that's always going to factor in unless you're retired or independently wealthy and can just travel as long as you want. You need to figure out how much time you have, and then you're always going to have like some sort of turnaround point. Maybe you've got a destination you want to see. So what I kind of do is I don't want to say where I'm going to end up because I don't want it to feel like once I've got there, the trip's over and now I'm just trying to get home. But find your furthest away point that you want to go and then figure out if you can get there in that time frame. You know, you're going to have to figure out how many miles you can ride in a day and how many you want to ride in a day. Those that have watched my trips on YouTube know that the first couple of days, don't be surprised if I put in back-to-back 600-mile days, which for some people, they may say, it's no problem, I can do that. And other people are going to look at it and go, well, that's twice as many as I can ride. The reason I do that is because usually within about 600 miles of my house, or even really 1,000 miles at this point, I've pretty much seen and done everything. And it's not to say I don't want to go back to some of those places, but I'm trying to get further away, or I'm trying to get somewhere else. So I'm okay with, you know, building that bank of miles up early on so then I can kind of coast later. So it's really a game of connect the dots. So you need to figure out, one, how many miles you kind of want to ride in a day. And if you're not going to do any stops, then 600 miles is doable. If you're going to add a stop in, and what I mean by stop is like some sort of point of interest. Now, maybe it's Cadillac Ranch down in Amarillo, Texas, which 15, 20 minutes, you've done everything. It's a bunch of Cadillacs buried in the dirt. I mean, it's not, but if it's a tour or something like that, and it's going to take a decent amount of time, normally, and this is my experience, if you're doing 300 miles in a day, you can probably get 2 decent stops in, 2 different points of destination, or points of interest. If you're going to do one, 400 to 500 tops, you probably don't want to go above that. But then it's finding, what town you're going to stay in that night. Now, typically, I'm staying in hotels, so I got to find like some sort of more urban area to get to. It doesn't have to be that urban, but a place that's going to have 2 or 3 hotels to pick from, that sort of deal.
So do you plan that ahead, like the night before or something? Because, booking a hotel, or are you just kind of winging it and hoping they have a vacancy?
No. So early on, I used to wing it. And then one time I showed up, I think it was in Canton, Ohio, and there was like some girls softball tournament going on. Every place was booked. And then I had to ride like another hour to get somewhere. So typically what I end up doing is, I kind of know where I'm going to end up the next day. And there's exceptions to this, but usually by lunchtime, I know if I'm on pace to get there. Now, because we're on motorcycles, bad weather can happen. That throws you off course. You get sidetracked because you see something else you want to go check out. That's fine. But normally by lunchtime, I have a good idea if I'm going to get to where I want to go that night. So at that point, I usually pull out my phone. I'll go to hotels.com or use my whatever. I'll use one of my apps to just find out, what rooms are available. And I'll go ahead and book it at lunch because I know if I'm 180 miles out and it's 1 o'clock, I know I'm going to get there.
Yep.
And I like knowing that the room's already booked and I don't have to, go around. We're on bikes. It's no fun to keep taking your helmet off and on and throw the kickstand down and walk in, see if you can get you don't want to do all that.
Yeah, and I imagine after a really long day, kind of mentally, you're just kind of ready. When you find that hotel, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done. And if you get there and say, got to go to the next one, it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it is. So I normally do that at lunchtime. There are exceptions. Like there were some more remote parts of Canada that I wanted to go through, and the way my route worked out, I stayed at this one lodge. That was the one lodge. They were off the grid. They ran everything off generators. So I did book that. It was recommended you book it about 2 days in advance. And I would have had to change my trip if it wasn't available. And what I mean by that is I would have had to change up my stop points either earlier or later. But that one I booked a couple of days out. Occasionally I will book them a couple of days out if it's something special that I want to get to. I think when Kristen and I stopped in Vegas there for those couple of nights, there's a specific hotel I wanted to stay at, so I made sure that was booked. I'm not one for going ahead and booking every single hotel of the trip, because if you get off pace one day, now I got to make
throws everything
10 phone calls to try to fix it all. It's just not worth it. So that really helps with planning, because I think that's the first step whenever you want to go. How am I going to plan it? Are there any type of technology features of mapping out the program that you use? Yeah, I've actually started using a new app called, I think it's called the My Route app. It is a paid service. I haven't used it to plan a trip yet, but my buddy Alan was using it when we were over in Europe, and I was interested enough in it. I think I did like a 3-year plan on it. But if you're not using that, this is the way most of my trips work out. I pick out the places I want to go, and I try to find like the most random things to stop at. Because even if it's just something like, I don't remember where I was, in the middle of Iowa or something, there was a big giant frying pan. It just makes for an awesome picture. It's a 5-minute stop. It gets you off the bike for a minute, and it's something fun you can share with your friends. But I use a few different websites to like find cool things to see along the way. And, some of like Roadside America, check it out and just spend some time. They got a map on there and all these different, some of them are cool, some of them are weird, some of them are kind of stupid, but it's just neat stuff. I see something on a TV show that I'm interested in. I'm sitting there with my laptop and I'll look it up. So one of the things I like to do when I find something interesting or something I want to visit or something I'm interested in, I create a Google map. And I just drop the pin there, and I'll name the map like Motorcycle Ideas. So then when I go, like, let's say we decide, hey, let's ride to Texas. When I start looking at routes and go, all right, what pins did I drop here? And oh yeah, that'd be cool. We'll route around there. And that's part of the way I end up designing the route. But ultimately, I still pull out my, I don't know what they are, $8, $10 Rand McNally Atlas from Walmart, because it gives you such great detail, at least down to like state routes. Like it's not going to give you back roads, but it's going to give you some pretty good detail. And I'll sit down with that and I start playing connect the dots. And then I'll eventually, because it gives you a much broader picture, you can look at an entire state on a page or two. And then I will go into Google Maps or something like that, or Garmin or whatever, and I'll just start putting the route where I want it. And then I'll take a look at it, because 300 miles of interstate is way different than 300 miles of, mountain windy roads. It is.
It takes more time, yeah.
Well, it takes more time, and it also takes more concentration. Like anybody can kick cruise on and, throw one hand up on the handlebar and point it straight. But when you start getting into more technical stuff, it just wears you out a little bit quicker. But once that's done, then I export it. I end up putting it on my Garmin GPS, which is still just kind of my outline. I don't necessarily follow it verbatim. I'll change things. But the cool part about, using the Atlas is you don't just see the road you're planning. You see all the alternate routes. So, and I take the Atlas with me still to this day when we're traveling. I throw it in the top case and I'll pull it out of there. And if it road closure, you decide you don't want to go that way, weather's going to be bad in this area and you want to go around it. If you've studied that map, then don't worry about your GPS and what navigation points you have on there. You can always deviate from that and then get back on.
Yeah, that's great insight. I kind of like the aspect that you talked about, that it's not about just planning your trip where it's just X amount of miles a day, because depending on what roads you're taking, it can use more energy, which brings me to the next question is, how do you kind of prepare for that aspect of riding so much physically? Because I think it's one thing to ride 500 to 600 miles in one day and then just be done. But to compound that over a long trip like you've been taking, how do you prepare for that?
I mean, it's a really good question. So for me, it's actually a couple of things. One, anybody that follows me on Instagram and you hop on the stories, you always see that I'm at the gym at like 4:30 in the morning. I mean, it's just been one of those things that I've been doing for 25 years now. I like working out. But there are a few things. I mean, one, it helps if you're in better physical condition, because you are taking, the battering of the elements while you're out there, whether it's rain or wind or whatever it is. Your body's going to take a little bit more of a beating than if you're sitting in a car. The other thing is, you need to keep some flexibility because of the position we're sitting in. It helps if you've got some core strength, because most of the time, at least when you're touring, you're sitting in a more upright position. You don't want to get in this thing of slouching. It's not going to be good for you over time. It's also going to wear you out. The stronger your legs are, the better off you are, because then that takes some of the pressure off the upper body. You shouldn't be muscling the motorcycle too much with the upper body. It should be pretty easy inputs, but definitely staying, flexible because of the position that they're sitting in all the time. But then the other part about it is, instead of just the physicality, it's getting that bike set up right. And I'll tell you what, people can make fun of me on an adventure bike for having highway pegs. Listen, if you don't have highway pegs on your bike, you're probably not doing back to back 600-mile days. I just don't know how you could do it, because your knees are going to get locked up and tight. And it's not like, you see the guys on like the full dressers or on the cruisers or whatever, and they got their legs way up in the air and they ride that way. I don't ride that way very often. I just need to change of position. And by having highway pegs, I can put my foot on top of the peg. I can put my leg over the peg. Like, it gives me like 3 different positions. And I don't necessarily do both legs at once. It might be one, it might be the other. It just gives me, and then I don't have to stop as often, which does allow me to cover more mileage in a day. So you don't have to be in like the greatest shape. You just got to be in good long distance motorcycle riding shape. So some of that comes with the conditioning of just learning to ride longer miles. You just got to spend more time on the bike.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's just some tips that you do along the way, the stretching, just moving to a different position. Some of that a little bit helps.
Yeah, just moving a little bit. And if you don't have cruise control on your bike, and I know more bikes are coming with it now. I think of the street bikes in my garage, 1 out of the 3 has it on there. But there's, what is that thing called? Cramp Buster. I've given that out. We've had them as a sponsor on rides before. That thing's awesome because all it is just this piece of plastic, and what it allows you to do is put it on your throttle. It basically stays out of the way. It's not a cruise control, but what it allows you to do is open that hand up, stretch those fingers out a little bit while the palm of the hand rests on this plastic tab that keeps the throttle where you want it to be, and you just go back and re-grip. Being able to do those sorts of things, man, it makes it so much easier to live with.
Yeah, I can reiterate that. It's not something I would have ever bought, but lucky enough to be gifted one from Mario, and I can't ride without one now. If you're riding for a long time, they're amazing.
$10 or something. And
it's
they make
well
them
worth it.
Yeah, they make them in some different sizes, and not just like for size of grips. They've got a skinnier one. They've got a fatter one. You can get a chrome one if you're into chrome, like whatever. But they're invaluable because when I first got one, I was like, oh, we'll see if this piece of crap works. But it was awesome because my FJR didn't have cruise. And by the way, that iron butt I did all the way down 95, no cruise control, just with a cramp buster. So, just being able to move while you're on the bike. The other thing is, this is just a real quick tip, and you probably saw us do this when we were on that Wild Wonderful weekend trip. When you come into town and you're at lower speeds or whatever, stand up. Just stretch those legs out. And I mean stand up on the pegs. Just stretch the legs out a little bit. That goes a long way to, keeping you more, I don't know what I want to say there. Keeping you engaged, keeping you, from not having to get off the bike.
Yeah, just little movements, I think, because I think that's what probably makes the long rides harder is when you're just in the same position for too long. Yeah. If you can just shift in some way, shape, or form, it helps for that longevity of a long trip.
That's for sure.
So we talked about body and how you kind of get ready for that, but the other aspect of it is obviously the motorcycle. So how do you get that ready versus a trip where you're just going to go, 100 miles and come back home? When you're literally going to travel across country, how do you get that bike ready?
So you got to take a few things into account. I mean, bikes normally have service intervals. So you've got your minor service intervals, which are typically things like oil change, maybe some filter changes, but nothing major. And then you have your big service intervals, which are like spark plugs, valve adjustments. We're starting to get into the motor a little bit now. We might be cracking some valve covers off. So you need to figure out how many miles you're planning on riding. And, your manual may say, hey, at 50, don't check the valve adjustments until 20,000 miles. If you're going to take a 4,000-mile motorcycle trip and you've got 19,000 on it, doesn't make any sense to wait to 20. Let's go ahead and have all that prep work done beforehand. It's okay to get off schedule. It's better to check those things and replace those things before they're due than long after they're due. At the same time, you need to think about your tires as well. Hopefully you've got enough, knowledge about your tires to have an idea of how long they're going to last. So again, you may only have 1,000 miles on them, but if they're 5,000 mile tires and you're going to take a 5,000 mile trip, pop them off, get a fresh set on there. You can always put the other ones back on. I've done that for trips before where I'm like, I'm going to ride 6,000 miles and, these tires already have 3 on them. I'll just put them back on later on. I know it's easy for me to say I've got a tire changer and balancer and all that sort of thing, but still it's worth spending the, $50 or $100 or whatever it's going to cost to have somebody mount them for you. So that's the first part. Make sure the bike's ready to go mechanically, but you also need to understand how your motorcycle works. I'm not saying you need to know how to, replace the top end in it if it goes out alongside the road. But if you're faced with some sort of mechanical issue, you need to be able to diagnose, A, is it serious or is it something I can let go for a while? And B, is it something I can kind of patch and be able to finish my trip? And I don't mean just like patching a tire or plugging a tire or something like that. When I took off on that Alaska trip, I didn't get out of my driveway. I had an oil leak on my bike. Now, it was my fault. But I say it was my fault. It was sort of my fault. One of the valve cover gaskets, or not valve cover gaskets, but bolt gaskets was leaking. I had this thing mapped out perfectly. Like I took time off work. I had exactly 21 days to get there and get back. If anything goes out of whack, I don't make it.
Throws the whole timeline
Yeah.
off.
So I'm freaking out. And I ended up calling John Ross, and I knew what I wanted to do. I just needed him to say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. And he did. And I just ended up taking him because it's not like a huge issue. Yeah, I was going to lose a little bit of oil over time. It's not a catastrophic failure. And I just took a bunch of high temp silicone and just put it around there. And I think it held for something like 18,000 miles before I finally went back in and fixed the actual issue. But you need to have an understanding of your bike. And, I think on that trip, like when I was in South Dakota, I was in the parking garage one night. I stripped my bike down, tank and everything's off of it. It takes me like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I remember that picture.
Yeah. And people were like, oh my God, what's wrong with the bike? I'm like, it's no big deal. Like I just wanted to seal it up a little bit better because I kind of did it on the fly. So you need to have a good understanding of your bike, how it works. You need to have a good understanding of how engines work. And then also, the specifics of your bike. Like you might have a chain drive bike, or you might have a shaft drive bike or a belt drive. Having a basic understanding of the mechanics, you won't freak out if something goes wrong. Occasionally little things are going to go wrong. You just need to figure out or be able to diagnose, is this serious? Like, is my trip over? Because I've always said, like, my car breaks down on a road trip, I don't care. I'll go rent another car. My motorcycle breaks down, man, I'm going to be sad because this is the whole point of going. So, yeah, it's just go over everything. The only other tip I'd give, don't leave on brand new tires. And I know I just said replace your tires, but go scrub them in for about 100 miles. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure whoever put them on, whether it was you or the shop, they're actually properly balanced. So, you don't get down the road and you get some sort of shake or wobble. And two, at least from my experience, normally after about 100 miles, whatever air is going to seep out of them is kind of seeped out. Like they've got a good tight seat on the bead at that point, and then you can top them off before you go. So, and it also just gets that kind of slippery, slimy part off of it. So, you're not thrown in that first corner and it slides out from under you. So,
yeah, great advice. I think, as you mentioned, it's just all about that prep ahead of time, because there is a timeline when you're traveling long mileage. You want to make sure that nothing kind of comes in the way. Obviously, there's going to be some things that could be unforeseen, but the more that you can do to prevent that, the better that you get to accomplish your goals that you have out. So next question I have is just kind of, how do you pack? What do you take? You obviously can only fit so much in a motorcycle. I'm not sure if you take any like fire starter or like anything like that. I know you have some camera equipment as well.
Yeah, there's some guy that commented on like a 2-3-year-old video and was like, "You're not prepared to ride cross country. You don't have any canteens or a fire starter or a tent. You won't survive." I didn't ruin the ending for him. That not only did I ride to California and back, I rode to Alaska and back, and I did not have one canteen or fire starter.
Well, to be fair, I think you did have a canteen. It was just called a flask.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit different. Yeah, so listen, I'm not going to knock the guys that like to camp out. Like, that's cool. It's just not my thing. Like, when I go on these types of trips, this is my vacation. Like that I don't go to Disney World for a week. I don't go to the beach for a week. I go on motorcycle trips. And especially when I'm riding the amount of miles I ride in a day, I don't want to bank on sleeping on that cot in the campground. I'm going to get a good night's sleep, that I'm not going to have some drunk a few campsites over making noise. I'm staying in a hotel 99 times out of 99. Like I'm always going to stay in a or motel. Like I'm not staying in Marriott's every night. Like I'll stay in a Motel 6. I don't care. Clean, comfortable room. That's all I need. So I don't have to pack all that stuff. Now, obviously I have a toolkit with me. And Cruise Tools makes an awesome toolkit. Some manufacturers still have decent toolkits. What I've done is use the Cruise toolkit along with some stuff I've stolen from the manufacturer's toolkit, and just stuff I've found that I can use. Like Honda Bond is one of the greatest things ever. It'll seal up just about anything. Always have zip ties, always have some sort of electrical tape, duct tape, those sorts of things. And just kind of make your own toolkit. Always take an air compressor with me with some plugs. Because you never know when you're going to have a puncture. I run tubeless tires on my bike. Most street bikes are running tubeless tires these days. So you want to be able to fix that. Heck, a good plug can get you through the rest of the trip. So, don't be scared. But I still prefer the compressors as opposed to the CO2, because the compressor I can replug back in as long as I got battery or juice. With the CO2, nothing wrong with it. It packs much lighter because the compressor takes up more room. But once the CO2 runs out, you're out. And you can carry a few cartridges, but still. So, I mean, that's a personal preference thing. I take tons of camera gear, which you really don't have to take unless you're making YouTube videos. A few other things. I always take my Atlas with me. Typically, I will take a bottle of water. Lots of times I'll just pick one up at a gas station. That's my bottle for the day, and then I'll buy another one later on. Take a rag with you or a towel so you can clean your face shield up. I usually take a little bit of cleaner spray so I can clean my face shield, and I can also clean my windshield on my bike and just keep the bike clean in general. If it's chain drive, make sure you've got a can of chain lube with you. I don't really carry oil or anything like that with me. If you've done your route planning well enough, and again, we're talking about on-road riding, you can find a motorcycle shop along the way. Like, it's not going to be that difficult if you need to add some oil or whatever. Obviously, you're going to take cash. You're going to take a credit card. You're going to take your IDs, those sorts of things. But when it comes to, like, packing clothes, I'm probably not going to eat any fancy restaurants while I'm on the trip just because I'm T-shirt and jeans and a pair of shorts. So, I've gone over this, not to plug my book again, but I did go over this in my book, and I think I've gone over it in some videos in the past. I do the 5-day rule. I pack enough clothes for 5 days, and then I just plan on doing laundry. You can find a hotel with a wash machine in it and dryer that you can go down and pay $1.50 or whatever to take care of. Or you might find a laundromat, that sort of deal. So, yeah, I usually just pack enough clothes for 5 days. Obviously, pack in layers. Never forget your rain gear. But like you and I talked about, now we're wearing Gore-Tex riding gear, so we don't have to bring the extra layers anymore. Charging cables, and that's not because of all the camera gear, but it's also because I run the headset. You've got a cell phone. You've got your GPS is normally plugged in. I don't think GPS is totally necessary. I like it as a nice to have. But, again, if you've studied your route well enough, you don't really need one. I really just use it to find out, hey, how far to the next gas station, because I've got the route planned in, and it won't tell me in a radius. It won't tell me in a radius how far it is. It'll tell me on my route, like 20 miles, there's one up the road sort of deal. So I don't know. I mean, I think I covered just about everything. Sometimes I'll take 2 different pairs of gloves because, you'll have like depends on what time of year you're traveling. You may have like a warm weather pair and a little bit cooler weather pair because sometimes you'll get to some areas where it's kind of cold in the morning and you want a little bit warmer glove to wear. Sunglasses, baseball cap. Can't go without those. It doesn't hurt to have some suntan lotion to throw on your face, even if you got a tinted shield. You are going to be out in the weather quite a bit, so it does make sense to have some suntan lotion on your face. But yeah, sunglasses, baseball cap. I mainly just wear a baseball cap because if I don't, my hair's all jacked up. You got helmet hair no matter what. If you're bald, still take a baseball cap because you don't want to burn the top of your head. So,
Great points.
All right, so I think I'm a little talked out right now. I think we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back a little bit more rapid fire. And I think Brian's got some good questions planned. So we'll be back in just a few moments. All right. We are back. Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know you got some additional questions you want to ask about some of my trips, so go right on ahead.
All right. Sounds good. So I think the first one is, I always watch the videos and always see you accomplish a lot of great things of where you're going, but kind of as you're going through the trip, like what do you really enjoy the most about motorcycle traveling?
I mean, I will get some comments sometimes. Like, why do you ride so much in a day? I mean, that's part of it. I enjoy being on the bike. I enjoy riding. I try to get to some, some really cool routes. Other times it's just, we got to ride through Kansas. That's just one of the necessary evils to get out west sometimes, or Nebraska or whatever the case may be. So you just kind of have to hunker down and get through there. But the riding is what I like the most. But the other cool part about it is, listen, you pull in to Colorado in your truck with West Virginia plates. Nobody says anything. You pull in on your bike with West Virginia plates and a conversation starting. One of the first questions you're going to get is, did you ride all the way here? And when you say yes, it's, did you really? Or is there a trailer around here somewhere?
Where's that trailer?
Like, nah, I rode in. So, I mean, it's a great conversation starter. I know, the people you meet along the way is awesome. I was up in, I can't remember, was it Fort Nelson up in Canada? And I was staying at a motel that night, and there was a V-Strom, one room over, and I think it had California plates. And I parked my bike, went in, unloading stuff. Excuse me. and hear a knock on the door. I just knew it was the guy on the V-Strom. I mean, who else is going to come and knock on your door? He comes over and I said, "Is that your bike there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "West Virginia?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I'm from I'm originally from Clarksburg, West Virginia." Guy and I ended up hanging out the rest of the night. I was solo on that trip. We were drinking scotch out by the campfire, and then we were over having pizza. And I've stayed in contact with him to this day. So that's a pretty cool part. The other thing is that kind of separates it, because I always hear I couldn't ride that far in a car. No, I couldn't either. Like, in a car, you're kind of stuck in that seat where I just sat. I mean, you can't stand up in your car. And I said, when you roll into town, sometimes it helps stand up. You can stretch your legs out a little bit. You can move around in different positions. But the other cool part about it is you feel like you're a part of the area you're in, because you're not behind a windshield. You're not covered by a roof. Like, whatever smells are out there, whatever. I mean, the temperature, like everything, you feel all of it, and you just feel more connected. And it also makes it more fun. Like, you plan your route because you're on a motorcycle. Like, if you're on a car trip, you may plan it somewhat because you're in a car. Like, but if you're driving like a family sedan, you're probably not picking out windy roads, where I might intentionally do that on my bike. And the other neat thing about it is there's almost always enough room to pull off to the side of the road if you want to grab a quick picture or see something a little bit closer or whatever, where in a car or truck or whatever, shoulder might not be wide enough, but on the bike, I can hop off the side of the road. So.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe there's some people out there that do this, but I don't think anyone gets in their car and goes, "I'm just excited about driving my car." They're going there to get to a certain destination. And while you're doing that as well, you're trying to get to destination, you're enjoying the ride as it goes. And I think that's what's great on two wheels.
Yeah, I mean, we always try to, connect the dots and find cool places to go visit. And when Kristen and I are traveling together, I give her tons of input. Like, she always finds cool stuff that she's interested in seeing. And what's funny is, I mean, there's been some trips where she's like, "I really want to go see this," and I'm kind of like, okay. Well, I mean, we'll go see it. I'm not going to complain, but it wouldn't have been something and then we go check it out, and it's, well, crap, I'm glad she added that. Like, this is one of the highlights of the trip. And I think vice versa. There's been some stuff I've wanted to go see, and she's going, okay. And then she goes, and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm glad we saw this." So I mean, that part's kind of neat, because there are so many cool things in the U.S. to see. The U.S. is huge. There's a lot of cool stuff to see. Yet you can get around fairly easily. But we live here in I know you're not in Northern Virginia, but the D.C. metro area, and we're used to everything being on top of each other. So when we take off on a trip, we'll hear things, "Oh, be careful," and I'm like, we'll get out to parts of Montana, we may not see another human being for an hour and a half. Like, it's huge.
Yeah, and as you said, the United States is huge, and I think what we do is normally we pick, when you're not doing motorcycling, you pick a place where you fly to, and you see that place. I think the difference is with a motorcycle is you're going through all the small towns, all these places you never would have flown to and visited.
Yep.
But you're going through tons of them over the course of a trip.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And it's one of those things where I like to make notes and go, I want to go check this place out, because you don't know what you don't know, and you can hop on the internet and you can read on forums, or you can watch TV shows, but there's some stuff that's still kind of, I don't want to say it's undiscovered. Like, some people know it, but it's not mass known, and you go check it out and you're like, man, I could have spent like 2-3 days here instead of the one night that we just happened to be here.
Yeah. So next question around that traveling aspect. Mm-hmm. So big foodie I am, and I enjoy kind of going to restaurants that I can't eat here. So if I'm traveling, I want to eat at some place that I couldn't go to if I'm at home. So what was the best meal or your favorite restaurant that you've done on your travels?
So probably the best meal I've had, and also the most expensive meal I can remember buying. Kristen and I were out in Jackson, Wyoming, which is not a cheap place typically to visit anyway. And there's a steakhouse. It's actually a pretty nice steakhouse down in the basement of what's it called? Million Dollar Cowboy Bar. We were totally underdressed, like jeans and a t-shirt, because that's what you pack in your saddlebags. But so we decided, well, if we sit up at the bar, we won't stick out as bad. I don't remember what we had for an appetizer. Whatever it was excellent. They had Wyoming whiskey. First time I ever tried it. That stuff's pretty good. A little bit harder to find, but I know a place locally that's got it.
Nice.
And then she ordered the elk burger, which she enjoyed and was enjoying it until she tried my steak. And I don't remember the name of the cut, but holy crap, was that good. Like it was perfect. And then she tried that, and then there was a fight back and forth as to who's going to have to eat the elk burger. And then I don't remember what we had for dessert that night, but that restaurant was just phenomenal. I think the check was, which I'm going to say this, and some people are going to say that's not expensive, and it's not. Normally, like one meal will be an expensive meal, and the rest of them are, your typical $50, $60, sort of like that. I think that one was well above 200. So
wow, yeah. But you're still talking about it, so it had to be.
Well, no, I mean that was back in 2017. I'm still talking about that meal. So that's the one I remember most. There was a steakhouse that was it just happened to be next to the hotel we were staying at. God, I'm trying to remember the name of the town, but it was somewhere in Tennessee. And we were getting ready to ride Tail of the Dragon the next day. Might have been, yeah, I don't remember the name of the town. It was either Tennessee or North Carolina. But it was just a steakhouse next door. I think I paid like $12 for steak, and that was an excellent steak. I still remember that one. I want to go back down there. I'll know it when I see it, but no, I'm with you. I like to eat at places I can't get to, unless I'm, I don't want to go. There's nothing against Outback or, Texas Roadhouse or whatever, but I want to eat at those places when I'm on a trip. I will occasionally because you're just in an area that it didn't work out tonight. There's no real like cool place to eat. So you'll
convenience factor.
Yeah, exactly. But try not to make a habit of that.
Okay, great. So next thing I want to ask is just around, with all this traveling and all this mileage, and we talked about kind of planning your trip, there has to be some times where you hit some weather that really kind of derailed the trip. How did you handle that, and what was one of the crazier ones that you had?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on one where, we were supposed to go to Rocky Mountain National Park, and we couldn't because it was going to be raining the next few days. So we ended up going to the Grand Canyon. So that worked out fine. We ended up, I don't remember what year this was, 2017, I think. I just remember riding through South Dakota and looking ahead, and the sky's just black. So I pulled up the radar there, and I saw the storm moving towards us. And it's not like being like in this area we're in, or more of a metropolitan area where there's like places you can get out of the weather. We're in the middle of nowhere. And there was a town probably 25 miles ahead, and storm's moving quick. And those of you that live out west, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but those of you on the East Coast, you can see a lot further out west. I mean, the sky's huge. Like you can see 100 miles away. It's crazy. And I just kind of put the hammer down, and I thought, well, we'll see if we can get to that town before the storm gets there. And to be honest, we only beat it by a minute, 2 minutes. Wasn't much. And I'm just like looking at buildings. I'm like, where can I? Because one, I didn't want the bike damaged because they were calling for softball size hail. We ended up not getting quite that, but we did get hail. And I was just looking for a place I get the bike out of the way because I didn't want it damaged. The bike was still pretty new at that point in time. And one, I didn't want to get myself or Kristen damaged. So shot down to like a gas station or whatever, and they were like, you got to get out of this weather. And of course they got like this big overhang, but it's too high to like really protect you from anything. So thank God I was on an adventure bike, because I ended up hopping up on the porch of the pizza ranch. So this wooden porch, and just parking my bike there. And fortunately everybody was really cool inside. They're like, you guys can stay as long as you want. So storm ended up blowing over, and that put us behind. We ended up not getting to ride some things we wanted to ride that day. So that one we kind of dodged. But going back to that Iron Butt trip, the plan with that was ride down to Key West in a day, and then ride back to like maybe Georgia the next day, and then ride all the way home the following day. And I got caught in probably the worst thunderstorm ever. I was on my FJR. I'm going down I-95, and you just see the clouds rolling in. And I'm like, oh, I wonder how far I can make it. And they were on me before I knew it. I ended up, I think it's probably the first time I ever pulled under an overpass, just because I'd always just ridden through everything before. But rain was coming down too hard. The wind was blowing too hard. And I remember I called my uncle, and I called him before I pulled over. And I was like, hey, can you pull up the Weather Channel and tell me what's going on? And he was like, you need to get off the road as soon as possible. I think I ended up staying in Palm Bay that night, but then there was another. I was right in between the two exits. Like it was 6 miles one way or 6 miles back the other. I had no option. So I kind of waited it out as long as I could under the overpass, and things were just getting worse. And it's also getting later in the day now, so I need to find a room. I was basically walking my bike down the shoulder of the interstate. Now I'm on the bike, but I mean the wind's blowing so hard, and it's not just the wind blowing. Like if the wind's blowing hard, you can lean into it, but when it's gusting, you can't anticipate that. So ended up getting off the exit, and as I'm coming down the exit, the water is so deep, like it's coming down so fast, it can't drain anywhere. It's up over the foot pegs of my FJR. So
creek crossing.
It was all, you're doing this on like a 660-pound bike without your gear. So I made it to, I think it was like a Holiday Inn, and I walked in, and this is no joke. They had to bring out mops to mop up all the water I brought in off of me. So made it in safe. I think I parked the bike under the overhang there, and went up. I wasn't going anywhere. Like I'm dead at this point. I'm just happy. I say I'm dead. I'm alive. I'm wore out. I'm just happy to be alive. And I called I think it was Domino's Pizza, and I was like, "Hey, and the guy was like, I don't know if we can deliver. I heard the road's flooded." And I'm gonna edit what I actually said, but it was something like, "Well, sir, I made it here on my motorcycle, so you can deliver it in your car." And they did deliver. It might have been Pizza Hut, whatever it was, but I did get my pizza that night. But that was probably the gnarliest weather I'd ever ridden in. And I hope the rain was bad, the wind was bad, but the combination of the two is what made it so nasty.
So you obviously stopped and you got the hotel because at the end of the day, you already accomplished the iron butt you wanted. So the real question is, what happens if you hit that storm on the way down and you're almost there completing your iron butt? What would you do?
And you got to pull the plug. I mean, yeah, the goal of whatever you have set, and in that case, the iron butt's cool. But if you don't, I don't want to say if you don't get the iron butt, but if you don't live to ride another day, it's not really worth it. So, I mean, the main thing there was to get off the road safely. Yeah, it ended up taking me like another day and a half to get home. I had to call off work that Monday. I feel like I had a pretty good excuse. I'm sure my boss was thinking, well, how did you think you were going to make it to Key West and back in 3 days anyway? But, yeah, that's kind of the, I'm not an iron butt expert. I've done one of them, but you got to keep that in the back of your mind. Like you have your goal you want to accomplish, but you don't want to risk too much to try to get that.
No, you rather miss the iron butt and ride another day. So a great point. Safety's important. So that brings a good segment into the next one. What is one of your scariest moments that you've had on a motorcycle on one of your trips?
I mean, obviously that Florida moment and that storm was pretty bad. I don't know if I'd consider this scary, but definitely like a butt pucker moment. Well, actually, two of them. Riding through Alaska, I don't know how many of you listening to this have seen moose in real life, but however, if you've never seen one in real life, however big you think they are, double or triple that, and that's how big they are. And, it kind of looks like they just kind of lope along and they don't have any speed. No, those things are like as nimble and as quick as like a deer, but they're like the size of an elephant. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but they're huge. And I'm pretty sure I was in Alaska. I might have been in Canada that morning, and I'm just riding along, and there was a pretty big drop off, like drainage ditch over to the right, so you couldn't really see. And next thing I know, this moose is right in the middle of the road. And that is not something you want to run into. So that was one. And the other thing about that is you're out in the wild. Like you'll see that at Yellowstone or other national parks. Maybe not moose, but wild animals. And I don't want to say they're tame because they're not.
But it's a little different probably coming up at speed.
Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And they're not used to being around as many people. Like you're out on the Alaska Highway. You'll see a few dozen people throughout the day out there, maybe more than maybe 100. But you're going through a national park, you see thousands of people, and that's every single day. And then, there was another incident, same thing, another moose. I just pulled over to I left that morning and I realized, I wore my lightweight gloves. I should have I got ready to pull over in this parking lot, and mama moose and baby moose were there. Nah.
Stay away from mama moose.
Yeah, don't want to deal with that. So, yeah, I mean, there's been some wild animal things that have happened. Overall, it's been pretty safe. There's been not scary. I mean, there's been areas where roads are out and you're riding on, well, not necessarily dirt, but like mud or whatever, and you've got a street tire on because you're on a street bike, and you just got to be able to handle those. But fortunately, I haven't been anything too scary other than that Florida moment and the occasional wild animal that that you're not going to win that battle. I guess the only other thing I point out, and again, it's another wild animal moment. I was coming back through Canada, and there's a stretch of highway there where there's just buffalo known to be out there. And the problem is, like, the people in the RVs and SUVs, they'll pull over and take pictures, and that's nice because they're well protected. I had on my Alpine Stars riding suit and my showy helmet. Like, that's all I've got. And I just remember there were bison on both sides of the road, and they're kind of crossing. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll slow down. But then they start crossing behind you. So now you start to realize I have bison on all four sides of me. Please, somebody clear the road, because I don't want to be. My bike's fast, but it doesn't matter if they're hitting you.
Yeah, if you got a roadblock of buffalo.
Knock you off. So, no, I guess those are the things. For the most part, been fairly safe.
Great. And I think the one thing that you talked about is kind of about anticipation. I've talked to a lot of people, and they have a lot of more scary moments, I feel like, than I have, and I haven't rode near as much as you. But I think I've avoided a lot of them just because I'm anticipating stuff that's going to happen. So I never get in that scary moment because I know it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, and part of that comes down to your planning. Like, I don't do a whole lot of riding around major cities. And if I am going to come into a major city for something, I try to hit it in off hours. I don't want to be riding into downtown Seattle at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's just silly. You want to hit that up noon, 1 o'clock, something, and then try to get back out of there before, everybody's leaving from work. And same thing with, any of the other roads you're riding. You want to ride within your pace, ride within your skill level, and where you're riding in areas where there's going to be wild animals, just slow down and kind of enjoy it. Like, it was fun. You and I were talking a few weeks ago, because people always ask me, do you run your GoPro all the time? I'm like, no, I just run it when I see interesting things. And I missed, like, whatever it was, the first 6-7 bears as I was riding down. I caught like the next 6 or 7 after that. But I'm aware there's bears all over the place, and there were bison all over the place, and those sorts of things. So just slow down, because it's not worth getting too up close and personal with those things.
All right, great. So you've obviously traveled a lot of places. You've knocked out all the states that you can ride to. So where would you go back to that you've already been?
Deadwood, South Dakota.
That's your favorite.
I don't know what it is about Deadwood. Like, this was 2019 was the first year in like the last, 4 or 5 years that I didn't go to Deadwood. I think it's just cool. I'm a fan of the show Deadwood. I like all the history and stuff that's going on there. The fact that you can gamble, you can get good steaks, you can get good drinks, those sorts of things. And then you're right there in the Black Hills. I know most people would probably pick out Sturgis because that's like the mecca for bike rally. It's like 10 minutes down the road. But there's so much good riding there in the Black Hills. And I think for me, it's like once you get there, there's so many other great areas you can ride, whether you want to go further west or southwest or southeast or whatever. I don't know what it is. That's just a cool place. I would like to get back up to the Finger Lakes in New York. That's something I haven't been to. And we just rode through there, and we were checking it out along. It wasn't a planned stop. We didn't stop. We didn't have time to stop. It was over like a long holiday weekend. But I remember saying back in 14 or 15, whenever that was, I'd like to get back up there, and I haven't been able to do that yet. So
lots of grapes.
Really?
Lots of grapes up there. It's wine country.
I'm going to hang out up there. I just remember seeing, like, it looked like people were having such a good time in the small towns and out on the water and those sorts of things that wanted to get back up there. So.
Yeah, cool. So best stretch of road, and I'm going to make it a little tougher because you're not allowed to use West Virginia because we know they have some amazing roads, but where else?
Yeah. I mean, I just talked about them. The Black Hills has some great stretches of road, but you didn't eliminate the Appalachian Mountains, so I'm probably going to have to go with going down in Tennessee. I mean, there's some great riding. And to be fair, listen, Colorado's got some great places to ride too, but I've missed a couple of those areas that I haven't got to ride yet that may change my opinion later on, and maybe I'll nudge that up a little further. But, yeah, I mean, Tennessee's got some – and not just the drag, and everybody knows the drag, and it's fine. But what's funny is if I didn't tell you were on the Dragon, you wouldn't know that it was that much different than the roads that you took to get there. And then, there's just anywhere in the Appalachian Mountains is fun to ride. Tennessee's got some great places. North Carolina does too, especially down in that area. Getting down through Maggie Valley, there's some cool stuff. And what's really neat about that is you can turn that into a trip where you're riding like, the Blue Ridge Parkway and then jump over into those areas and ride through Tennessee and even get down to Alabama. I mean, that's some really good riding.
Yeah, so for those people on the West Coast that say we don't have mountains, we just have hills, we actually do have some good riding, and it's definitely worth the trip.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, we don't have the height and stuff that they have, and we probably don't have some of the scenic views they have. We do have. We got some nice riding.
Those twisties.
Yeah.
All right, great. So with you going to all the states, there's still a very vast amount of the states, as you're passing through certain ones or you ride certain areas. Are there any places that you still want to go that you haven't been to?
Yeah, I want to get to Tombstone. Not that I think that's going to be like the greatest riding thing to get to Tombstone. I mean, I'll find a great route along the way, but I just mean like that specific area. But I kind of touched on it there with Colorado. I've yet to ride $1 Million Highway. And that's because each trip, weather has popped up the 2 times I've been out there. And it just, could I have ridden it? Yes. Was I going to miss the experience of it because it's raining or because, the weather's bad? Yeah, so it didn't make sense to do it. So I do want to go out and ride that. There's some parts of Southern California I haven't got to ride yet that I want to go check out. I'm trying to remember the name of the trail down in Arkansas I still want to ride, and I want to get up to Mackinac Island. Obviously, they won't let you ride the bike on Mackinac Island, but
just a place to get to.
I'd still like to get up to there. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I want to go up and ride those parts of Michigan.
So my last question, and maybe this is a bit selfish, as I said, I'm really looking forward to do a big trip here in the near future. So what are kind of the 3 top tips to someone that wants to take a trip? Maybe they've only kind of done the smaller overnight weekend. Maybe they've never done anything. So what are the top 3 tips that you'd give?
It's tough because we've gone over a lot of stuff already tonight that hopefully people find useful. I guess the first one is you can't do everything. Every trip I take, I get why didn't you do this? Why didn't you? But if I were to take everyone's recommendation, my 10-day long trip just became a 3-year trip. You're not going to get it all. So just be prepared for that. Pick out those 1 or 2 must-dos, and you can make those happen. Outside of that, it's a bunch of maybes. If everything works out well, we don't hit traffic, we don't hit bad weather, all this type of stuff. But, hit the things you want to hit, but just be prepared to know you're not going to get everything, and you're going to start planning, and it's, oh man, I wanted to get this. You're going to have to make tough decisions, but always look at it this way. I'll get it next time. Because I get there's not always going to be a next time, but at least in my mind, I know I'm going out on another trip next year. I'll hit it on that one. I'll hit it on the one after that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, do your research, plan. I've hit road closures. I've hit bad weather. I mean, there's even been times where I've looked at the weather map and then I pull out the atlas and I'm like, you know what? We're going around that storm. We're not even going to deal with it. But be prepared. Do your planning. Know your route inside and out. Know all your possible alternative routes, and look at it every morning before you take off, just to refresh your memory. I do that every morning. I pull out where our stops are going to be. I pull out my atlas and I just kind of retrace everything. And sometimes I'll look at it that morning and just change it on the fly, just because I don't know. That road looks like more fun today, and I want to take it. So, and then the other thing, I mean, just enjoy it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Don't worry about whether or not you're going to make it to that next point. You're going to have your plan, but if the plan doesn't work out, it's all right. Enjoy it. You're going to have so much fun along the way. And if I were to add a 3B to that, just go out and do it. Even if you don't listen to anything we went over tonight, and you just want to go out and wing it, go out and wing it. And this is like the third episode we mentioned Rusty. Rusty just took off one day on his bike and came back 3 or 4 days later. That was his first ever trip. He didn't even know where he was. Just go out and do it. You're going to enjoy it, and you can figure out the rest along the way. Nobody starts out as an expert. If you're listening to this podcast and then that's like, okay, well, now I want to go listen to other podcasts about it or go watch more YouTube videos about it. That's fine right now because it's, depending on when you're listening to this, we'll just say it's February or March when this posts. That's fine. But once it gets warm, stop doing your research, even though I said do your research, but go out and do it and just try it. And I think you're going to enjoy it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all the questions I have, and I just want to thank you. I mean, this is some really great insight. I'd like to say that I'm over here taking notes, but I don't have to because I can just reference this podcast.
Exactly. Maybe we'll get to the point where we put timestamps in, but I'm a little too lazy to do that and a little too busy to do it right now. So any other questions you want to ask tonight, Brian?
No, we're good.
It's open forum.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some in the comments. So for those on YouTube, just leave an additional comment in the bottom.
Yeah, and if you're not watching it on YouTube and you're listening to it on a podcast platform, obviously there's not a way to leave a comment, but if you head over to the Facebook page, Two Wheeled Rider, go comment. You just go drop a comment on the page, or if we've got the video link to it, drop a comment under there. Or you can just send us an email at twowheeledrider.com. It's the number 2 wheeled rider, DOTCOM @gmail.com, if that makes sense. So, hey, man, I enjoyed it again tonight, but we got to get to some sleep because we got to get up early tomorrow morning and go ride dirt bikes in Costa Rica, which we did not have to plan because we have our own guide. So I feel like I'm kind of cheating.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait and escape this cold weather here on the East Coast.
Yeah, I think it was like the high was like 30 today, and the low down there is at night is like upper 60s, and the highs most days, what did you say, is getting up to like 100?
100, yeah.
It's crazy. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you did and you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to give us a big thumbs up. If you're listening to us on one of the podcast platforms and you haven't given us a rating yet and you enjoyed tonight's podcast, please be sure to give us a rating. If you want to give us a little bit more time or you want to listen to a few more before you give us a 5-star rating, that is cool. Once again, my name is Mario Orsini, and I'm joined by
Brian Boyer.
And we'll talk to you guys again soon.